Step into the Oracle Parlor, a podcast where those interested in witchcraft, psychic abilities, ghosts, and all things paranormal come to sip and spill the magical tea. This parlor is a space to grow by maintaining our curiosity over fear when it comes to the spooky and the paranormal. I'm your host, Jenny, otherwise known as Phantasma Witch. I'm a previous visual storytelling artist from animation, now full-time psychic witch, who is getting her MA in psychology to become a licensed therapist. Every other episode, I will share my paranormal experiences, different witchy experiences on a variety of topics, while other episodes, I will be talking with witchy guests of all backgrounds, from writers to artists to well-known social media witches, so we can learn about their practices and how they grew into their personal power. So get cozy and grab your tea. It's time to get mystical. Hello, my magical, mystical besties. Welcome back to yet another episode of the Oracle Parlor podcast. And in today's episode, I'm going to be answering another common question that I get. So last time, the common question was, is it my imagination or is it my intuition? This time, the common question that I often get is, where do I begin with psychic intuitive development? How do I start? Where do I go from here? I get this question all the time. And I realized that while I have a lot of resources here on my podcast and over on my Patreon, I haven't really made any kind of post talking about my personal experience, ideas, and beliefs around the process of how to even start and the steps to take towards psychic intuitive development. I've kind of talked about all the parts very separately, dispersed over all the different kind of platforms. So I'm gonna hopefully clear that up today and talk a little bit about that process. So before I begin, like always, these are based on my personal experiences, my personal beliefs and practices, which means that you are seeing from my perspective and my lens. And it also means that you don't have to agree with any of the things that I talk about here. If you have a different set of beliefs, a different idea based off of your own experiences, that's absolutely okay. We do not have to agree. That's what makes this so wonderful. You can take what works for you and you can leave the rest behind. There's no pressure to do as I do or say. And you absolutely should be using your discernment with everything that I say. You don't have to feel like it's my way or the highway. And I absolutely do not encourage that whatsoever. So, with that being said, what is the first step towards intuitive psychic development? So, before I really get into it, I do want to clarify the wording that I am using. And you may have heard me say this before, but personally, I see the words intuition and psychic as slightly different. So to me, intuition is the gut feeling, the first instinct, that little ping that goes off that something is up, our our little spidey senses going off. But psychic is to take that intuitive ping to the next level and take it further to actually investigate it and try to receive more information than just the initial pop-in insight. That's how I like to use intuition versus psychic skills, and psychic information. So hopefully that makes some sense as we get into this conversation. And so the first step to really developing is to, one, bring mindful awareness to your day-to-day life. And I know that sounds really boring and basic. I'm not going to sit here and be like, blast open your third eye. No, we're doing the reasonable, actionable steps. Everybody is psychic, and this is, to me, the most important step. Not most important. The first real step is to just bring awareness to your day-to-day life. That means being present, being in the moment. How often have you had these intuitive pings that just go off randomly out of nowhere as you're doing dishes, in the shower, driving down the street? It literally pops in when our mind isn't hyper focused on something. It's when we're kind of like in what I like to call just a flow state. We're open. We're not actively engaging like we are if we're on our phone or on TV. And even at that, watching TV is what I meant to say. Even at that, when we're on our phone, sometimes it feels like we're not actively engaged, but our mind is somewhere else, right? We're over here, we're receiving information in a different way. But when we're washing dishes, we get into this rote memorization of our body does the actions, our body does the actions. We're vacuuming, our body does the actions. We're in the shower, our body's doing the action. We're just going with it. And usually in those moments, if we're not listening to like music with lyrics or a podcast or something in the background, usually our mind wanders during those times. That's how we bring that mindful awareness in so we can start noticing when we get those moments where it's, I think my sister's going to call me today. And then she does. I think I'm going to get a text from a longtime friend that I haven't heard from in a while. And then you do. If we start to kind of quiet ourselves in those moments of being in flow, we may start to notice more of those little pop-ins. And when we can bring attention to it, it makes it easier for us to take mental note and say, okay, something just popped off here. Something just happened. Let me write that down. Let me make a mental note of it. Let me remember this specific thing that popped up for me, and I will check back on it later at the end of the week, in a few hours, however long you decide to wait, and see whether or not those things happened, whether or not any of those things make sense. Hindsight 2020. Because that's the thing with psychic skills, and I've talked about it before, and I will say it again, especially when it comes to predictions and premonitions, we don't know until we know. We don't know until we know. Once it happens, then we go, oh my God, I had an intuitive ping about this. I had some psychic insight about this, but I didn't realize that's what it was. I thought it was just a random passing thought. I recently made a TikTok video about how one morning I was making breakfast, and during breakfast, I thought about The Simpsons, specifically Mr. Burns. Why was I thinking about Mr. Burns and The Simpsons? I don't know. I don't watch The Simpsons. I haven't watched The Simpsons in years. I hadn't recently seen anything related to The Simpsons. The Simpsons were not something that would pop into my mind randomly, so I took a mental note of it. I went, why am I thinking of Mr. Burns from The Simpsons? That's strange. Let me file that away. I'll come back to it later. A few hours later, me and my partner are in the kitchen making lunch, and I think we were talking about the cats or something. And then my partner does a Mr. Burns impersonation in the same exact spot where I was thinking about Mr. Burns only a few hours earlier. Now, I had no idea that that was going to happen until it happened. And it didn't seem very direct as one might expect from something like That's So Raven, where if anybody has seen that show, this character who's psychic gets a psychic vision and she sees it playing out one to one exactly how it's going to play out later. That's not how it typically works. Not in my experience, and not that I've heard from a lot of other psychics. It's not typically like that. So in my case, like in this situation that I'm talking about, I just simply thought of the character Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, period. That's just a random thought. And then my partner did the impersonation later, and I never told him about this random thought I had. He just did it. I even asked him, why did you decide to use Mr. Burns? It had nothing to do with the conversation. And he was like, I don't know. I just thought it would sound funny. So, when we are able to bring that mindful awareness to those random pop in thoughts or visuals or sounds, whether you're clairaudient, clairsentient, whatever clairsense tends to be the one that pops up more for you, aka, do you see things in your mind's eye? Do you hear things in your inner ear? Do you physically feel a sensation? Do you emotionally feel something? Just making mental note of when those things pop up. Which leads me to my next point. And I would say this is probably the most important one, in my opinion. I know I had accidentally said that earlier, and that's why I had to stop myself because I'm like, no, no, this isn't it. This, what we're about to talk about, this is, in my opinion, the most important. And that is, you know, understanding ourselves deeply, truly. Oracle of Delphi, there's a quote over the door that says, know thyself. And that rings so incredibly true. If you are genuinely interested in becoming a, like, I don't want to say becoming a psychic, if you're genuinely interested in honing your intuitive abilities to be psychic skill sets, the most important thing you can do is know yourself, understand yourself. Which means, and again, I know it sounds boring, it doesn't sound fun, you're not blasting open your third eye. I'm not going to sit here and be one of those online psychics that say, align your this and that and, force open your third eye to see in the sixth dimension. No, we're going to be grounded here in the most magical way possible. And knowing yourself is the foundation to building upon your psychic skill set and honing that intuitive ability that is innate within all of us. So, what does this mean, know yourself? Well, it means understanding your, let's say, your physical body. For me, that was one of the first ways that I started to really know myself in a very unexpected way that I didn't think I would end up doing, but I did. So when I found out that I had endometriosis, I was forced to go to physical therapy before my surgery. And during that process, I had seen a few different physical therapists on rotation. One of them was a physical therapist that worked on the physical body, and another one was a physical therapist who also they mostly worked on the myofascial, I'm maybe saying that wrong. It's the layer between the skin and the muscle, is where they specifically worked, and they were somatically trained for releasing trauma from the body. And so by doing that work, it forced me to stop and recognize what I was sensing in my body. So that way I could communicate it to the person working on my body so we could track it and make sure we weren't going outside of my window of tolerance, that I wasn't getting activated or triggered. But the point of this is to say that doing that kind of work really forced me to be really, really, really present and notice subtle shifts and changes within my body, physically, within my emotions, and within my mental state. Because that kind of work can be really, really activating if you have PTSD or CPTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, and anxiety, like I do. And so it's really important to make sure that you aren't staying quiet and just letting somebody push you beyond your comfort zone and then having kind of like an emotional, mental, physical moment of breaking, which can be really difficult, which is what happened to me the first session I went in. So I had to really, really understand what is my baseline feeling of emotions? What is my baseline feeling of the body? What is my baseline mental state? So when I say baseline, it's just talking about how you typically feel on an average day and noticing it. On a typical day, how do you feel mentally? And that's going to be these are going to be different answers for every single person. How do you typically feel on an average day, mentally, emotionally, physically, energetically, even? How do you feel on an average day? Make a note of that. Be aware of that. So that way, when something shifts outside of that range of your baseline, your average, then you can go, oh, something's different. And this is how we apply discernment, where we can ask ourselves, is that something different coming from within me or outside of myself? Which is the next step in this process of developing psychic skills. First, we become mindfully aware of the pop-in intuitive pings. Then we recognize our baseline. Where do we feel typically throughout our day? And next, we use our discernment to ask, is this coming from in or is this coming from something else? So, for example, one of the questions that often gets asked is, how do I know if that it's not just my anxiety? How can I tell if it's, my anxiety? So anxiety comes from within us, and anxiety is very, very, very pushy and very forceful and very much like go, 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 do, do, do. You should, you have to, you must. It is demanding and it is fear-based. It is a sensation that's going to make you feel panicked, like you have to or else, that there's negative consequences. So that's not the same as intuition, where intuition will come in, drop the info, drop whatever it is, and walk out without explanation. Anxiety tries to explain it. Anxiety tries to give name to it in the moment. Now, we may get an intuitive ping and then we may try to understand it and break it down and explain it later, but it's not the same as when anxiety comes in. Immediately, it also comes in with all the explanations and the reasons and the this and the that. I am giving you all, I should also clarify, I'm giving you all the quick and dirty version of this. I could write an entire book on this topic, and I may just be doing that actually. Um, so please note that this is very much the condensed step by step of how to kind of hone those psychic skills, intuitive abilities into psychic skills. So, as I was saying, we're wanting to now focus on our discernment and ask those questions of where is this coming from? Is this outside of my baseline? Yes, okay. Do I have a reason for XYZ feelings? And trying to just become a psychic detective. You're just investigating without trying to force anything. Just investigating, just being curious, and just taking note of it. And that's it. It's as simple as that. So if you say, and I'll give you an example of something that happened to me. One time I was working at the cafe as a tarot reader. This was like about 2 years ago. And I was um, starting to get the table decorated. And I overheard the cafe owner say something about their daughter and their daughter's boyfriend. And as soon as they mentioned their daughter and their boyfriend, in my mind's eye, I saw a wedding. And I took a mental note of it because I was really surprised because at the time I didn't really know the owner or their kids or anything. And so I was like, huh, okay. That's interesting. So I have a notes app on my phone where I actually write down all my intuitive pings that I get. And I wrote down this intuitive ping that I had this experience, and this is what I saw. And I didn't try to push it. I didn't try to figure it out. I just went, okay, that's curious. That's interesting. Writing it down, moving on with my day. And then I believe it was about somewhere between 4 to 6 months later at the cafe, I overheard that the owner's daughter, their boyfriend proposed to them and they're engaged. So I was able to go back to that note in my notes app, look at the date, and see that little intuitive ping that I noticed had played out. So just by noticing, just by bringing attention to it, just by naming it, you're already developing. And I know, again, it's not the fancy Hollywood magical, I'm blasting open my third eye and I'm summoning a deity to channel into my body to reach higher levels of knowledge. These are very they seem and they sound very mundane, but they are extremely effective ways of developing. And I'm saying this from experience because I really, really, really struggled with even believing that I was psychic at all. And now I work professionally as a psychic. So just by tracking, just by noticing, just by naming, we're already, one, getting ourselves into a psychic state of mind. We are kind of therefore prepping ourselves on a subconscious level where we are telling our brain on this deeper unconscious level, hey, this is something that's important that we are bringing attention to. And we're building almost like psychic rote memorization, kind of like I was talking about. We do the action without thinking about it. We do the action without thinking about it. The more and more that you bring mindful awareness to those intuitive pings that pop off, the more you are building the connections in your brain to say, these are things that are important that we are noticing. And the more it becomes that rote memorization where your brain goes, oh, okay, so here's another one. Oh, okay, so here's another one. And sometimes, more often than not, we end up surprising ourselves with just how often we get these intuitive pings that we just were not tracking before. Because oftentimes, unless it really, 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 really stands out and slaps us across the face, we typically don't think about it. We typically don't even consider it. Unless it's something like I was saying, oh, my sister's gonna call me later today. Huh, that's a weird thought. I wonder why I had it. And then a few hours later, she calls. Unless it's something like that, we typically just brush it off and we don't even think about it. And it gets filtered away and we don't even realize that we had something happen, that we received something, that we got some sort of insight or guidance, and we just didn't even listen to it or sense into it because it's too far back here and we just don't consider it as important on the conscious level. We just kind of push it back to the unconscious, right? So, by bringing that to the forefront of our mind, it's letting our brain know these things are important and I do want to be aware of it and I do want to bring this forward. And then once you look back at your, like, if you do like what I was suggesting, how I did, which is, and I still do, I keep a notes tab on my phone with anytime I notice these, I try to write it down. Sometimes I forget, and that's fine. It happens. Sometimes I just make a mental note of it. But when you're starting out and you keep that journal and that log, that diary of all of the times where you think maybe this could have been something, even if you're not sure, even if it ends up being nothing, just write it down and go back to it much later and check off which one was actually something, intuitive, which ones actually had some sort of meaning for you. And I guarantee you, you'll be shocked at just how many you ended up picking up on that you would have never realized previously. You would have never known in the past. I have all these notes on my phone. I tend to go through them and kind of try to delete them. Um, but I have these notes on my phone where I go, "Oh yeah, that did happen. Oh yeah, that did end up playing out in some way. Oh yeah, I did get that feeling that I should have done X, Y, and Z thing, and I did, and it worked out really well. And if I hadn't, it would have been bad." Things like that. Because that's the other thing too, is I'm not just talking about predictions here. I know a lot of the examples that I have given are predictions, but this can also just be, you know, I was going to go to the store to go uh, buy some groceries and I wanted to buy myself chocolate. And then I had a really strange feeling for some reason that I really shouldn't buy the chocolate, even though I wanted it or needed it for a recipe. I chose not to buy the chocolate. And then I got home and it turns out that my partner got chocolate when they were out and I didn't know until I got home. Something like that. It could be just getting some sort of guidance of "Psst, maybe don't." And then we go, wait, why shouldn't I? And then there's nothing. That's the intuitive, the intuition comes in, drops the info, bounces, which can be really frustrating at times. But if we can bring that awareness to it and see it on that list, it will, like I said, it will really boost our confidence overall. It will show us that it's not just us, and it will make us feel like, oh my gosh, I can do this. I mean, we can, but it's one thing for me to tell you you can do this, and it's another thing for you to see evidence, confirmation, validation that you're doing it. And you can get that evidence and validation from yourself just by, like I said, bringing mindful awareness to the day-to-day moments, bringing awareness to your baseline level of feeling. And of course, when it comes to some other steps that we can take to develop our psychic skills and our intuitive abilities, is I am a firm believer in energy work being a crucial part to witchcraft as well as psychic work. I honestly believe that it can help us to develop our psychic skill set even way further than before we had done it, if we hadn't been doing it at all or very little. And the reason why I say this again is simply from my experience. So, around the same time that I was attending those physical therapy sessions that I was talking about earlier, where I was having to be extremely mindful and aware of my mental, emotional, physical state, I was also starting to take Reiki classes with my teacher, and I was working my way up to getting my master's certification in Reiki, which I have. I am a master teacher Reiki um, practitioner. And so as I was taking these classes, when I first started, my teacher had said, it's not uncommon for people to get into this practice and start to develop other like intuitive psychic things that they didn't realize. And so when my teacher told me this, I thought that was really interesting. And I should clarify that when my teacher was talking about this, my teacher was talking about it in the sense of just energy work in general, not just Reiki. Like it doesn't have to be that form of energy work. It's the one that I really liked and resonated with me because I Previously, forever ago, I was actually studying to be a Japanese major a long time ago. And so I had done a lot of studying on the culture and the language of Japan. And so Reiki really resonated with me on a lot of levels for other reasons too that are personal that I'm not going to get into because we can have secrets here, right? We can have privacy. So, anyways, um, so in regards to any kind of energy work, is what my teacher was talking about. Being able to do energy work can heighten your sensitivity. This is honestly what I believe based off of what I experienced. When we attune ourselves to being able to sense energy, it opens a lot of doors in regards to our psychic intuitive abilities. So, energy work makes us very mindful of our own energy. What does our energy feel like? What does our energy field feel like? How does energy feel to us specifically? How would we sense that energy in what ways? And bringing awareness to all those things. And then taking that and expanding it even further beyond just ourselves to, okay, what does the energy of an object feel like? What is the resonance, the energetic resonance from that object? And then moving even further beyond that to what is the energetic resonance of another person or a living thing, not just an inanimate object, with which I believe, like as an animist, that everything has its own energy and personality in life. And we can get into that into another episode. But beyond the inanimate, moving into the living, uh, a living person or an animal or a plant, and moving into that of what is that other entity? What do they feel like energetically? What's their energetic signature? When I tap into their energy, do I feel different than my own energy? What's that? No, like, what does that feel like? Again, notice how everything comes back to asking ourselves questions, noticing, being mindful, being a detective. This is why I'm saying everything really at the core of development is truly understanding yourself, being really mindful of those things and asking those questions, no matter what it is that you're doing. That's the core element to all this, no matter how you're implementing it. So, going back to energy work, we go from ourselves to an object to another person, and then even beyond that to a location. That's not even like so, it could be a location that we're in, or the step beyond that is to go from a location we're in to somewhere we're not even at and sensing into the energy of something else outside of ourselves that's further away. So, energy work also being in someone's energy, from my experience, will honestly pull from your psychic senses. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. Because I feel like the only way I can really describe what I'm trying to say is to just give an example. So back when I used to offer Reiki sessions at the physical therapy studio that I used to get physical therapy at, for a short while, I actually was a practitioner at the studio as a separate entity business, and I would offer Reiki there. And oftentimes, what would happen for me, and I have heard this from many energy workers from many different forms of energy working practitioners, not just Reiki. But one of the things was that I have experienced and that I've heard from other people is that when you're working on a client, you will psychically start to pick up on things within their energy field. So for me, for example, I may be working on somebody's energy and I'll kind of sense into an area on the body where there needs to be a little more attention and care. And I will hear in my inner ear the words, I need support. I need support. I don't have enough support. I don't feel supported. Or I've even had it happen before where someone's past loved one was in the room while I was doing the work, the Reiki session. And so when we get into this kind of energy work, we may start to notice these different things kind of popping up for us, like I said, in different unexpected ways. This is actually how I also started to really become aware of my ability to communicate with animals. It was because I was practicing energy work, Reiki, on my cats, which I've talked about in a previous episode, um, where my cat was sitting in my lap and I was petting her and I was doing Reiki on her. And all of a sudden, I was getting visuals and blips of feelings and words. And it was because I was in her energy and able to connect in with her in that way. So, this is all of these things combined. These are reasons why I feel like energy work can be another really great starting step to developing your psychic skill sets because energy work will pull from different clear senses. As I was talking about working on somebody's body, and I heard in my inner ear a phrase, and sometimes I would feel in my physical body where I needed to focus on their body, or I had sensed somebody's loved one there, or I may have gotten a visual of a memory of theirs and something stuck in their energy fields through that memory. So, doing energy work can be really beneficial for developing. And everybody is different. So you may get into energy work and you may notice a lot of different things, or you may notice a few different things here or there. But the point is the word notice. Again, we come back to how doing this comes back to the root of notice, discern, be curious, ask those questions, be mindful, be aware, know yourself so you can know the difference. So, energy work may open doors for you if that is something you're interested in doing. I know there was one person I had talked to, I forget who this was. It was a long time ago. It may have been at a market or something that I worked at, and they were an energy practitioner. And we were talking about this, how this happened for both of us, where I was saying, doing energy work really opened me up to my ability to connect in with animals more. And this person told me that when they did their energy work training, and I don't think they were Reiki, I think they were something else. I'm not sure what, I don't remember, but they said that they started to be able to see aura, like colors in people's auras. They could see colors and shapes within someone's aura, and they weren't able to do that previously. So it's almost like bringing our awareness, bringing our attention, bringing our focus, our intention, and everything into honing and developing energy working skills actually makes you more aware of these things that were probably always in the periphery that you just didn't know. It was probably always there and you just didn't realize it. The amount of people who come and sit down for a pet communication session with me who already are communicating psychically with their pets. So many. Almost every single one of my clients, almost every single person who has sat down for a pet communication session, they're already communicating with their pets. They just don't realize it until I come in and I say exactly what they felt, what they saw, what they intuited. And I had to come in and validate it and be like, ah, there it is. You're doing it. And sometimes people aren't even conscious of it at all. Is there a chance that I was communicating with pets long before this moment that I had with my cat when I was doing Reiki on her? Oh, absolutely. There, more than likely, I had been communicating with my pets as a kid and I wasn't aware of it. And there's a chance that I thought it was just me, which is honestly the same exact thing that happened when I was a kid who was sensing spirits and spirit activity and seeing ghosts. I convinced myself that's just me. And then it gets pushed to the deep recesses of the unconscious mind to be forgotten, filed away, because it's not important. The mind says, oh, it's not important. We don't need this. And then as we start to open ourselves back up, we go, wait a minute. Now that I'm sitting and reflecting on this, I had a lot of experiences. I do remember seeing ghosts. I do remember communicating with my grandma's dog or whatever that may be. So, all of this to say that, first of all, everyone's journey is going to look different. This is how my journey looked. It was the mindful noticing, the mindful awareness, understanding my baseline, doing the energy work, really did, as I've been joking throughout the episode, last open my third eye. It really did open a lot of doors for me. It really increased my psychic abilities just because I was being more mindful and aware, just because I understood myself more. Also, I should mention, at the same time as going to physical therapy and learning Reiki, because those two things were happening at the same time, I was also finally starting to go to therapy regularly. So I was doing the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic mindful awareness all within the same span of time. And that was not intentional. That was, I got forced into a situation by life circumstances that forced me to be in those places, doing those things all together at the same time. And oh, it was rough, but wow, did it end up working out in a way that I could have never predicted. Sorry if my camera's a little laggy. I have slightly different settings on today, so if you're watching this, I apologize. So I'm not here to say that you have to go and do all the things all at once and do it back to back. No, move at your own pace. Start doing the things that feel best for you. If it's as simple as just keeping that little journal of those intuitive pings and that's your first step, great. If the first step is to start going to therapy more if you can afford it, if you have the privilege to do so, fantastic. I highly, highly, highly recommend going to a therapist if you can, or counselor, or some mental health practitioner of some sort if you can. Again, I understand not everybody has the privilege, and that's a whole other thing. Um, if it's simply starting to do therapeutic journaling and reflections, and I'm not talking, I want to make this very clear, I am not talking about witchy reflections. I'm talking about therapeutic reflections. There is a difference. As a therapist in training, as a psychic witch, I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this that I have not made any kind of video or I haven't really talked about it at all yet, but there is a difference between witchy shadow work and therapeutic shadow work. They're very, very different. And sometimes you will actually find a witch who is either a therapist or very, very, very knowledgeable on therapy who does do more of the therapeutic leaning shadow work style stuff. But the amount of classes and workshops that I have seen that are shadow work, that idea and that concept is a therapeutic concept, but it has been taken into the spiritual community for very positive uses. But I do want to clarify they are two very different things. So when I say doing a therapeutic journal, I don't mean a magical journal. I'm talking about how you can keep a journal to keep track of your intuitive pings. That's a magical journal. Keeping track of your manifestations, that's a magical journal. Keeping track of your dreams, that falls in between the two, in my opinion. It is both magical and it's therapeutic. So when I say, doing a therapeutic journal, maybe you're writing reflections based off of, you know, things from your childhood. Maybe you're reflecting on some difficult emotions that you had that day. That's the kind of therapeutic journaling I'm talking about. Getting to sit with the emotions and actually feel them, and then journaling about it later and talking about how you feel to your journal, writing it down. Um, meditation can be another great mindful awareness practice. Everybody knows this already because it's a great way to become present in the moment in your body. And I want to make it very clear that when you are meditating, you're not trying to not think. You're trying to allow the thoughts to come through and then let it go with ease. And just be like, oh, there goes the thought. Instead of being like, oh no, I'm thinking. I have to not think. I have to focus on not thinking. A whole other topic. This is why I'm condensing a lot of big concepts down into bite-sized pieces in this episode, just because I get this question so much of how can we develop our psychic intuitive abilities? And so I'm doing my best to try to give you um, something that could be, like I said, a full book condensed into a, 40-minute episode here. So I'm doing my best. So I hope so far you're getting a lot out of this. That's my hope. Um, so yeah, becoming present in the very present moment and your physical body. It doesn't have to be meditating. That could be sitting outside, touching some grass, sitting next to a tree, sitting in the sunshine, just noticing. This means don't bring your phone, don't bring headphones, don't, notice the sounds of wildlife, if there are any. Notice the sounds of city life, if there are any. I don't know if the mic is picking it up, but they're doing construction on my street. So if I went and sat outside, I would have to notice that grinding, wonderful sound. Notice the sunshine on your skin. Notice what it feels like to breathe deeply and have your stomach and your chest fully expand with a breath and then fully contract with the out breath. That's another form of bringing that mindful awareness into the day-to-day life. Talking about energy work, even if, again, you don't have the ability or the privilege to be able to attend classes for energy work, which, by the way, yes, I'm going to plug here. I have classes, monthly classes on my Patreon. And over the last few months, we have been doing exactly this: energy work, energy exercises, getting to know your own energy, what it feels like to sense into it. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But if you don't have the funds to be able to do that, simply sit and notice your energy, just bringing attention to what does my energy feel like? Sit with a tree. Notice what it feels like to sit with the tree. Notice if you're picking up on anything from the tree. Sit with a crystal. Notice what it feels like to sit with that crystal. Just bringing awareness to the energy of it and trying not to question yourself or shove it away as I'm just making it up. Again, go listen to Imagination versus Intuition, that episode I did a little while back, to hopefully get a better understanding of that. So, my friends, I've done my best to try to condense these core concepts on what I believe are really important foundational keys and ideas to developing your intuition into a psychic skill. And I hope that it helps. It was a very condensed, very compact version of it that I could teach multiple classes on, get really, really deep into, get into really fine details. So I know it was very broad. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them to the email that is in the description, oracleparlorpod@gmail.com. And hopefully this gave you some motivation, some insights on ways that you can start doing this work, ways that you can start um, developing, and above all, be curious and have fun. My friends, be curious, have fun. Don't make it work. This psychic, magical space should feel like play. It should feel like fun. The moment it starts to feel like work and you feel like I have to do this thing and you start dragging your feet, no, have fun with it. Try to make it engaging and playful. Engage with that childlike wonder and curiosity that everybody has in them. Sometimes it's just got to be woken up a little bit. So, thank you all again. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me in the parlor for this episode. If you want more psychic magical tips, make sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Phantasma Witch. Phantasmawitch. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon, where I have a Discord community. I do Q&As, live classes, workshops, and more. To book a reading or consultation directly with me, you can go to my website, www.phantasmawitch.com. All of these links can be found in the episode description. And please, if you enjoyed this show, make sure you go leave a rating, leave a review, share it with others. It really helps the show to reach new listeners if you take a moment to do that, and it is sincerely appreciated. Shout out to the artist Cat Lines, who helped me to redesign the podcast logo to the beautiful magical teacup you see today. See you, mystical friends, in the parlor next time.